Hey, Patricia.
Hi, Kim.
How's your weekend?
Ah, working. It's been busy. I'm teaching a course on Latin American art for the first time at American University this semester. And I'm pretty excited about that. And the students are all wonderful. They all happen to be art history majors and minors,
Oh,
which
wow.
makes the discussions richer, and it's so much fun when that happens. We're opening our spring exhibition this week here at the gallery. We're showcasing works from our permanent collection. So that's it. It's just been nonstop. How is it been for you?
Yeah, that's a lot. Well, a little easier than you. I've been catching up a lot, and I've been thinking a lot about primal screams
Hmm.
and doing a primal scream and what that means and how that feels. And um, I kind of like this idea of screaming against the tide, but not in a metaphorical way. Actually, in like a physical walk down to the charcoal dirty tide and start screaming at it kind of a way. Um, it's it's an absurd act, but somewhere in that absurdity, I think it might make me feel a little better.
There's a bar in New York where you can not scream, but you can break the glass. So maybe you can try that too.
Yeah, next time in New York, I'm gonna full on break some glass. That sounds great. Um, that's hilarious. So I can go to a cat cafe and then a bar and throw glasses. That's
Yes.
that's fantastic.
I love it. I want to join you on that itinerary.
It's a deal. It's and then we'll go to a museum and not do any of that.
Yes.
So today we have our first guest, so it's really exciting. I'd like to move on from screaming against the tides and maybe get in touch with other ways of being in touch with our bodies and ideas.
Welcome to The Art Equation, a podcast from Now Be Here. I'm one of your hosts, Patricia Ortega, and our historian and independent curator.
I'm your other host, Kim Schoenstatt, a contemporary artist and organizer of Now Be Here, a directory of and for women and non-binary artists.
On this podcast, we have a little charla, a little bachipapo about making art and making exhibitions. We invite fellow artists, curators, archivists, and people from different areas of the art world to share their knowledge and their experience.
We are curious about what goes on in the day-to-day of arting. We want to talk shop, get in the weeds about what goes into art shows, talk with the makers and the doers of the art world. Welcome to The Art Equation.
In today's episode, we are chatting with Lisa Diane Wedgeworth, one of the artists who participated in Now Be Here's Guest Curator initiative back in 2020. On that occasion, she was in conversation with art historian and professor Jordana Saggese, who is now the director of the Driskell Center for the Study of the Visual Arts and Culture of African Americans and the African Diaspora here at the University of Maryland. And I have to say that since then, I have been a huge fan of Lisa Diane's work. I remember back then I saw her abstract black and white paintings and I thought, oh my gosh, I need to know who this artist is and I need to learn more about her work.
Isn't that so true? I love those moments when you like see the work and you're like, I want to know that person. I want to know more. I want to hear more. I want to get into it. And we're so lucky to have her back. I'm going to read a short bio for our listeners who might not know you, Lisa Diane. Lisa Diane Wedgeworth is a contemporary artist and cultural producer whose body of works include performance, video, and large-scale abstract paintings, prints employing mark making that interpret the psychological and spiritual and emotional energies. She earned her MFA from California State University, Los Angeles, and has exhibited her work in galleries and museums in Southern California, including the Orange County Center for Contemporary Art, Tyler Park Presents, Charlie James Gallery, and CAM, or the California African American Museum. She is both a 2018 Hermitage Artist Fellow from Inglewood, Florida, a 2020 COLA awardee, which is the City of LA Individual Artist Fellowship, and has participated as an artist in residence at the Camera Obscura in Santa Monica and the Georgia Fee Artist Residency in 2016, France. And that's just a few of her accomplishments. Welcome to the Art Equation, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We are so excited to get to talk to you, and we have some questions to kick this off.
Yes.
So, this is actually for both you and Kim to answer. And I was interested in the fact that you two have known each other since the very start of Now Be Here. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, I think I remember receiving an email. That's how I found out about it. Like women were sharing these mass emails or selective emails to their friends. And I remember reading about Now Be Here, the short statement that came with it, or just the fact that women were gathering to be documented. And I was like, oh, I need to be a part of this. And I think in that email, there might have been a request for volunteers. And I'm always like, I'll volunteer before I even know what's going to happen. And I got there, and I think, honestly, probably the easiest things was, I'll register people in. I'm like, I'll sign people in. I wanted to sit down. I didn't want to move around. So, and I also thought it was strategic, because I thought, I'll have this list. I'll be meeting people. I'll see everyone who comes through, So that's what I did. People would tell me their names, and I'd see, I can't remember who at the moment, but maybe see someone like, oh, that's so-and-so. Or you'd see older women come in, and everybody's scrambling like, oh my God. And I was like, well, who's that? Why don't I know who this person is,
Oh, yeah. I remember when Betty Saar came in,
and
everybody was like,
right. But I guess I don't remember if I met you right when I got there. I remember someone else.
So we got there early. All the volunteers, we all got there like an hour early. And that's when we kind of got the news that the iPads that we were supposed to have access to didn't materialize.
Okay.
And we had to kind of scramble and print out lists and like reorganize like super last minute. But it was thanks to people like you that the whole thing kind of happened.
And what is the stereotype that women organize really well and get together? Because I think when I got there, the lists were already together, so I had no idea any of that happened.
Yeah, we definitely.
So you guys were on point.
We had access to a printer, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I just I'm glad you reminded me of that. I mean, of course, because I know Kim and her creation of Now Be Here, but I guess it's all just blended together because I'm like, well, when? Like, I just feel like we've always known each other now.
Yeah.
Like, that's
well,
what it
has
like.
been almost 10 years.
It's been 10 years?
Yeah, 2016.
Wow.
So we're 1 year away from our 10-year.
Wow. That's amazing. Time really does go by quickly.
That is such a great story. I love that you have been with Kim and with Now Be Here from the beginning. And it's funny and interesting that when I came in 2020, I was thinking about artists I wanted to work with and I wanted to learn about. And I remember seeing your work and being like, I want to know more about this artist. And I told Kim, and Kim was like, oh, well, Lisa is just so wonderful. You're gonna love her. And it was funny because it's sort of, we keep coming back to you and to your work, and Kim and I happen to be just huge fans of your work. And it was this also sort of the idea to bring you back also developed organically because we were like, we want to hear about what Lisa Diane is doing now. And so it was like wanting to catch up with you and wanting to hear where your work has gone since that time, since 2020 or 2021 when we last spoke to you, which was right after COVID. We were still in that time. So what are the updates? What do you want to share with us? What's happened since then?
Oh, wow. Well, so much.
Yeah.
Literally, figuratively, physically, emotionally, mentally, like all of it. Where do I begin? Well, I guess the most recent thing, maybe I'll work backwards, or it'll unfold organically. My studio has moved from City Terrace to San Pedro. I'm now at Angel's Gate. So I left my studio in City Terrace at the end of the year, December of last year. It was time. I had gone through a very traumatic experience in 2022 where I survived my apartment burning down. Actually, then I wanted to pack everything up and just escape the world. My dream was to go to Mexico and do silversmithing and not come back. But I have a daughter here, my mom and everyone. But honestly, the reason why I didn't is because I told myself, you can't, you teach. Like, you have to be here. Like, that's a silly thing to consider. And so I stayed, and I would sit in my studio just hours, not making work. And then I'd make a new painting, the black paintings. And then I'd sit for a long time too, just gathering myself, you know. And that went on for some time. I did make work in 2022 and 2023. It was the lunch we had with Alexandra Grant.
Yeah.
And we went and saw a show. You'll know, I don't remember.
Yeah, Samantha Thomas.
Samantha Thomas was
and that
was
was at Anat Egbi.
Yes.
And she was in conversation with a curator, Heather Harmon.
Yeah, it was sometime during our lunch in that space after the artist talk where I mentioned to Alexandra about wanting to do something new. And she just said, well, do it. Like, give yourself permission. Like, it was so easy. And I was like, oh, I can. So I went to my studio, and right before I cleaned it up and did everything, I said, well, I have another black painting I need to make. And I made it. And I'm glad I did. And then I cleaned everything up and said, I'm done with these black paintings. There are other things that I need to do. And then I made some more because things kept coming up and I needed to make them.
Right.
But I was really at peace with giving myself permission to do something new. And then that February, all of this leads up to what I'm doing now. And then that February, I did go to Mexico for 30 days.
Oh, good.
And I worked with a silversmith and made some rings from, you know, little granules and things. But I'm sharing all that to say, when I came back in 2024, I started making paintings very differently. When I make my black paintings, there's a lot of pouring. I rarely use a brush unless it is the shapes that I'm laying down, gesso or the black, you know, acrylic and oil paint. So I started only painting with a palette knife. And it really opened up things for me. The scale of the paintings were reduced. They're 13 inches by 13 inches, using a palette knife, only 3 hues, mixing every combination of those 3 hues that I can get, and I'm making these works. And it was so freeing.
That's actually a really interesting point, because one of the things I was wanting to ask you was, you know, after your apartment fire, how did that affect your work? So it's interesting that you're talking about shifting so phenomenally from the large scale pouring.
But it took a minute, right? Like, I talked myself out of it, right?
Oh, interesting.
I didn't give myself permission to do it. I was afraid. You know, I have to say, you know, after the fire, and I'm at a much better place, there are so many things that I wanted to do, and I realized any shift that I wanted to make, the next thought that would surface would be, but you're an artist. What are people going to think? This is your community. It was all external. It was all about what other people thought. And I was just like, well, I have a right to do whatever I want to do, you know, give myself permission to do something else. I still love those black paintings. I still have them in me. They'll come out again. But I knew that it was important for me to make time to really experiment and investigate and to play in the studio. You know, all those words we always use, but to really do it. And to do it with a freedom and a confidence. And, you know, I was talking with an artist friend about this, and I said, actually, I think one way that I really feel at peace and free is I'm not working with a gallery. So I don't have anyone that's coming to me saying that I have to make a certain type of work, or, you know, doubting what I do or trying to guide me in a particular direction. I'm really free to do whatever I want to do. And one of the important things was moving out of that studio. It was time. It was a nice size for me. You went to the first studio. I don't think you went to the one when I moved into the back. It was a slightly larger.
Oh, wow.
And nice amount of space. I had no windows, no fresh air. And for a lot of people, that might not be a big deal. But I was also, after fire, living in a space with no windows or fresh air, and I had to get out of that space. And so now I'm in San Pedro, and although it is a little farther than my other studio, when I go over that hill on Gaffey and I see the water and feel that air, and I go into my studio and I have windows and natural light and fresh air coming in, I'm like, oh, this was worth it.
Yeah.
You know, what am I doing now? Making these smaller works, but also saying yes to certain things. So it's not necessarily what am I making, but what my approach is. So even today, I have to present this work to the city of Santa Monica at 5:30 today. And when I received the email, it was an arts administrator who was reaching out to see if I knew somebody who could do this project. And my first thought was, I can do it. And then I thought, oh no, I don't do this kind of work. I need to give it to somebody else. And I thought, well, why not? Like I do have these conversations. I don't know if it's perimenopause or is it just me?
It's with yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, I love it.
But I did. I was like, I can do this. Like, Lisa, why can't you do this? And it's weird. Like, I don't have a problem talking about this stuff because I think that when we think about artists and we look at artists and we see the work on the gallery wall and the museum wall, it all looks so easy, but there's all this stuff that we go through, you know, mentally.
I actually want to interject for a second, and then I want to let Patricia jump in here too. But I did want to, it was interesting what you were saying about the black paintings and somehow that you had developed a persona who made these large-scale black paintings, and how as artists sometimes we get locked into this public persona of what we're known for, and then we're afraid to change because then you hear things from folks like, well, collectors don't know what to think when you change like
That
a
part.
180.
Yes, that part. And I want the freedom to be able to do that because there are artists that do that.
But like older artists did that all the time. Matisse did that a lot.
time, right.
Like, I mean,
Well, and that's why I said, what am I doing now? I'm saying yes. I'm saying yes. So this piece that I did, it's small. It's 18 by 24 inch, ink, a medium for me. It's an abstract work with a little bit of representational imagery in it. But when I responded to the arts administrator, I said, I'd like to put my hat in the ring for this. This is what I'm considering. But if you don't want me, here are two other people that could do it.
Yeah.
100%.
100%.
They responded and said, oh, we want you to do it. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then I was like, oh, shit, what did I get myself into, right? So I wrote this proclamation. I did the work. And I'm like, I'm glad that I did this. And I think that this saying yes is not really about other people. It is more about Lisa saying yes, knowing who you are, trusting yourself.
Yeah.
And like when you just mentioned about doing new work, I don't remember how you phrased it, but I think for me, and I can only speak for myself, there was a fear of, what if I make this new work and it's not good or people don't like it?
Sounds like you have a very strong connection to those paintings. You said, I needed to make the black paintings. And then I'm thinking, Lisa, these paintings are masterpieces. These are some of the most incredible artworks that I've seen. I absolutely adore these works. So my question is, where do you go after this? And I guess that's probably a question for you, right? Like, how am I going to make work that's going to continue, right, being so amazing and so interesting, right? How do you keep it up?
Well, that's a great question because how many of us really think all of our work is amazing and interesting? So I was in the studio yesterday and I met the artist who is literally right across from me, and I stepped out to get water or something because I don't have a sink in the studio. And she said, "Are you in the Valley of Suck?" And I said, "What?" She said, the Valley of Suck, like, it starts here like, yeah, this is amazing. Oh, this is pretty cool. Well, this works to, oh my God, this is horrible. Oh, I really suck. And I was like, I said, that's my rotation, like this whole month, right, while I'm working on this project. It took me forever to get to a place where I'm like, okay, this is it. Because I was like, this is amazing. I can do this. And it was like, oh, this is horrible. Why did I even say that I could do this?
That's so relatable.
Oh
my God.
So I love the black paintings. Do not get me wrong. I love the black paintings. Hey, I'm keeping this conversation real because I'm sure there are other people who think of this too. I don't have a gallery that represents me. I don't have people visiting my studios, buying them off the walls like other artists have, the experience that some other artists have. I do look at my work and I'm like, this is dope. And sometimes I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know what? I just made them for the collective that's not here yet, So that's how I have to think. And then sometimes I have that thought that scares me. And I'm like, oh my God, what if I'm one of those artists who I'm 90 years old? And then this 22-year-old curator shows up, like, we've been looking for you. And I have like 20,000 paintings because I've just been working all this time, you know?
Well, and that's not uncommon for women artists. That's kind of our trajectory.
Yeah.
Like, that is a perfectly reasonable thought.
I'm like, oh no,
You're not that disconnected from reality is the sad part. You know, like,
And the retrospective comes, and
Well, it's like I said, really, it's about me and the way I allowed myself to be limited and tight in my perception of who I am, what it meant to be an artist, and the work that I was making. And I have lots of ideas that I pushed aside or suppressed because I was making these black paintings and they had to be blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Lisa, do whatever you want. You're an artist. That's why you're here. This is your laboratory, your experimental place. Make what you want to make. Doesn't mean that I'm giving up on those black paintings, but they're just resting right now, that part that needs to make those, right?
do you think part of that was because you lost everything? Like, because you already had to, like, you were forced to let go.
That helped because, you know, when you go through a traumatic event like that, and a lot of people are experiencing it now, you're like, what else do I have to lose? Like, let me do what I really want to do in this world, you know? But it was also, you know, my apartment burned down. 7 months later, my sister died. 26 days later, my dad died. So there was a lot that I was dealing with, and I just wanted to be away from it all.
Yeah.
You know, I just wanted to go someplace where no one knew me, where I could just be. And then finally I just said, you know what? I have to take this time for me. So I literally went to Mexico for 30 days. Came back and it's like, Lisa, you have to start making the work, the additional work that you want to make. And I phrase it that way because those black paintings are still wonderful and I want to make those. But now I'm giving myself space to paint in a different way, play with the scale, change that scale and change the hue and do other things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we were taking a look at your prints, your new series of prints, and wow, I mean, where you have taken, like the direction you have taken with the use of the inks and exploring like this fluidity, this new body of work is something different. It's so also dynamic in the sense that it moves more. It has more motion, I will say, than the black paintings, which were more muted and were have a certain seriousness or infinite depth as I think about them, right? Which is what I like about them. But then the prints are so different. Also,
yes.
Print is a different medium. So I was curious to hear from you how that shift has been.
Oh, that was a wonderful experience. It was also extremely challenging. I made those prints with Serio Press. They used to be based in Pasadena, right around the corner from Art Center. Oh. They've just relocated this past December, right before the fire. They invited me, again, you know, my own issue with, you know, it's like I don't lack confidence. It is, I think I, for some time, have allowed myself to be locked into this idea of what I was supposed to be doing. And that invisible barrier, my thought barrier, prevented me of seeing how far I could go or what I should be doing. Because it's not me thinking that I can't do it, you know? So Serio Press came to my studio a couple years ago, said they wanted to work with me. And I was like, yeah. And then I avoided it because I was like, again, what am I going to do? How does my work translate into print? Somehow they reached out and I went by the studio again, saw their facilities, and they gave me acetate and said, just, you know, paint on this. So I painted on that with black ink, went back to the studio, and I was like, Lisa, you have to get this done. Like, do this and just show up, you know. And Tony, one of the founders of Serio Press, burned all the screens, and we made a series of prints made with a combination of those screens and various colors. And it was such an overwhelming experience because it's an infinite number of designs you can make. And the printing skills that Tony has are amazing. So there's nothing wrong with the prints, but I just kept feeling inside like something's not right. Like they're beautiful and they would love them. And I was like, oh yeah, but inside I'm like, oh, I have to put my name on this. Like, this is not me. And what I realized finally was they were too graphic in nature. And he showed this process, pulling ink through the screen a particular way or using something else. It was watered down. And that's when it hit me. I said, I don't feel my paintings in these. And I knew how I made my paintings. And I have a tendency when I'm going to do something to make it the biggest job ever when it can really be reduced down. It doesn't have to be so complicated. And so I was like, I need a hardware store. I need all these tools. And then I was like, Lisa, again, you're doing too much. So I went, there's a little alley behind, kind of like a street alley behind them. And I said, I need to go for a walk. And I called 2 artist friends, Olivia Booth.
Oh, yeah.
And June Edmunds. And neither answered. And that was the best thing ever. Because I sat there in the sun for a moment. I walked down the alley. And on my way back, because I kept thinking I need these tools and these brushes, I saw that fountain grass. And immediately I said, that's my brush. And I ran over to it and I picked them and I was literally saying, thank you, fountain grass. Thank you, fountain grass.
Wow.
And I went upstairs and I started thinking about how I make those paintings. And I did it on a small level and I used those as brushes to apply the ink. I said, that's what it was. My hand is not in this. It feels too graphic. So I painted all of the background, all of the substrates, the paper with the ink in these 3 different tones. And then once they dried, we chose an image to represent breath. And then we screen printed those. And that's how those works came about. But again, in my mind, I was like, they're investing in me. They're buying me lunch every day. I have to know what I'm doing. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
But once I did it, and they left me alone. Like I was there till like 9 o'clock at night once. And Tony was like, it's time to go to bed, because they lived there. But once that connection was made, then it just flowed. But again, it's all about, getting out of your head. It's the same thing I tell my students. You have to stop thinking about it. Pick up that brush, pen, pencil, whatever, and start making those marks moving because you're generating those ideas. I was so stuck in my head about what I thought it should look like and had to get out and stretch my legs and flow and it came.
I want to ask you another question that I had thought about and also has to do with something you addressed during that interview back in 2021, which is about the role that the body plays in your work. It was central to the Black paintings, and now these prints have this theme of breath and breathing and again back to the body. Tell us about that.
I've always been one who's been aware of myself, my body in space. And I don't mean outer space, but I mean in the spaces that I occupy. And I think not in an arrogant way, but I have things to say and how my life experience and the way I've engaged with space and people and things are really important. And maybe this is my own self-therapy, getting them out and working things out and painting things. But I think my story is important. And by making work informed about literally my body or the experiences I've had are my way of making them permanent. There's a part of me, and ever since childhood, that loved writing. And I wanted to be a writer. And I wish I had developed those skills early on. Not that I can't do it now because I am writing something about my experience in the fire. Not the fire itself, but some things I observed about dwelling in houses and homes. But my father was a writer, an unpublished writer. And this is my way of, I think, writing, just visually, Sometimes I use words, literal text in my work, but I think this is like, I'm writing in a different format, telling my stories.
That is quite amazing. Yeah, quite a beautiful thought. And I actually write a lot about the relationship between painting and writing as two activities that are connected. Text and texture share the same root word. So there is that connection, and I love thinking through that.
And this also reminds me, I wanted to touch upon your conversations about abstractions, which people can find on YouTube because you thoughtfully archived them all up there.
Yes. Thank you. I took a really long break from that, and it's something that I'd like to return to. I was doing it. I'm sitting here and you guys have an amazing setup and are so organized. You have your everything. I was just like, brush my teeth. I got to get on. Like, who's coming up next? But it's a lot of work for one person because, I have the interviews and then I have the Instagram page and I was researching abstract artists from around the world and writing blurbs and researching photos. It just became a lot. To alleviate that, I did reach out to artists and say, hey, would you like to take over the page for a week?
Yeah, right.
But again, I think it has to do with my love of conversation and storytelling and making space for people, creating community. And that is a really wonderful project that I'd love to revisit.
Can you tell us a little bit about it, though? Like,
Yes.
Where was it coming from and why did you feel like there was a need to have conversations about abstraction?
Right. So I was awarded the 2020 COLA Fellowship.
Right, the City of Los Angeles Artist Fellowship.
Yes.
And it's one of the trifecta grants for LA artists, by the way.
And so Stephen Wong was, I guess, one of the curators or the curator. So anyway, Stephen Wong comes to my studio with two other people and we're talking and he asks, what conversations are you having with other abstract artists? And I feel like he said, what conversation are you having with other Black women abstract painters? And I was like, well, outside of a few friends, I'm not. So I immediately reached out to a handful of Black women painters who are working in abstraction and said, let's have a conversation. What does this mean? Blah, blah, blah. And we had a private conversation on Zoom and just talked about our experience as abstract painters, those who have come before us, when we learned about these artists, a variety of things. And then we were like, oh, this is great. We should have this conversation and invite people to listen. And we did. And then I said, well, I want to have this conversation with other people and let's share this space with other people. So I specifically started reaching out to anyone, but I definitely knew that I wanted to include voices that were historically marginalized or omitted from the Western canon. Mm-hmm. So I believe the second conversation was with Rosanna Barbarian, and I'm not prepared for this question.
That's
so you guys can look at, yeah.
We can all people. You can find it on YouTube, and we'll put a link in the.
So an
episode
Iranian
notes.
artist and an Armenian artist who talked about abstraction and textiles in their culture, and then I had one with Asian artists, and then there was a show at Woodbury University, the Nan Ray Gallery. And I believe all those artists were like, over 50 or over 60. So I had this conversation about that work, but also being an artist who is mature in age. So I spoke to people of varying walks of life, and it was really interesting.
What were some of the common grounds when it came to the experience of African-American women abstract painters?
Well, one of the common grounds was that oftentimes, because the work is abstract and there are no black bodies in the work, and I'm putting up quotations, that people want evidence that a Black person made this work, which is a shocking thing to hear. They want evidence. So like, what is it that we're supposed to put in the work to make it Black? I heard that from someone in the studio. I said, well, do you see that black triangle? That's a Black body, So we have very successful, well-known abstract painters who are African-American or of the African diaspora or who are African. Like, what evidence do you need? Why can't you accept the work and the quality of the work and the innovation in the work or the beauty in the work with the hand that's made it without what you believe evidence, that you believe there should be a particular type of evidence in this work. Mm-hmm. Right? And that was concerning.
Yeah.
When I heard that. And it's not the first time that I heard it,
Interesting.
Yeah. It, in a way, refrains people from engaging with the works of art in a way that do what the works are meant to do, which is to open your mind and to have an experience that is not your everyday experience, right? Connect with forms and with the materials and with the colors and with the shapes, right? So,
well, that's the thing. If you walk into this space and you're moved by a work of art, and you have the means to purchase it, then purchase it. But what is it that the collector or the curator is really saying if they feel they cannot own or exhibit this work or sell this work on your behalf because it's lacking something that tells the world you are a Black person. Black people are not a monolith, right? And whatever that evidence would be, whether you are from the continent of Africa or from a Caribbean island, whether you are from a Spanish-speaking country or a French-speaking, what have you, or from Mississippi to California, that evidence, whatever you think it will be different, right? But what is it that you need? Why can't you enjoy this work on your wall and have people come over and admire that it's a painting without you having to say, a Black person made that? And what does that really mean to you? What is that currency for you?
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah.
Kim, you were going to say something. I was just going to say I'm just so interested in your perspective and your experience because, yes, coming from our history, I don't hear a lot about Black abstract painters, especially women painters. Here in DC, we have Alma Thomas, and the history of Black abstraction or Black abstract painters is what I think is that other history, right? That history that's repressed or kept sort of outside from the canon. And yet, if you look at it, it's just so sophisticated and so incredible that it really needs not to be seen as something that is being rescued or as being valued now because we're trying to make up for this exclusion. But it is in its own right amazing.
Well, and that's the thing, right? We're at a time where a lot of history is being intentionally omitted. And talking about Black women abstract painters, all of us are very aware of Alma Thomas, Howardena
Pindell, yes.
Frank Bowling, Fred Eversley,
McArthur
Binion. Okay, so I
remember you dragged me over and you're like, oh my God. Right. And I was like, this is amazing. Tell me about this person. We must have sat there for half an hour.
Right, because I remember when that New York Times article came out, what was that, 2017, 2018, 2019, something like that. And it highlighted Black American abstract painters. And I'm scrolling through the article and I'm like, who is this? I see this abstract work with a triangle. And I'm like, my triangle brother, McArthur Binion. I had never heard of him, right? Even though I'm doing my own research, I've never heard of him. And so that's part of this importance of us, first of all, doing our own research, but those of us who are teaching to make sure we're including as many people as we can, not flooding your lecture, but you have these people on your list.
Yes.
So you need to bring them up, right? Because I never knew. I didn't even know about Mark Bradford when I was in grad school. I found out, no one ever talked about Mark Bradford. I found out about Mark Bradford. We had to take a trip to Mocha. And I'm sitting there waiting to go in the auditorium for a lecture. And there's this pedestal with this monitor on it. And I see, and it's silent. But he's talking, the volume's down. I'm like, who is this person? And they don't even look much older than me. And I'm like, who is this? And his name came across the screen. And I said, well, I need to look this up. And I remember going to my painting instructor saying, why haven't you mentioned this person? I'm making abstract work, So, yeah, we're out here. We're out here doing it. Part of my saying yes is Lisa focusing on herself now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's
right. And that doesn't mean that I don't make space for people or can't do wonderful things, but it has felt so good. So I moved out of my studio this past December, had the space in San Pedro a little bit before that, but I'm teaching and doing things. So I can't really get into the space like I want. And this month I've been there, if not every day, almost every day. And I'm staying until 9:30, 9:45 because they do close the gate at 10, so I don't want to get locked in.
Don't get locked in.
But it feels so good. And I'm like, oh, yes, Lisa needs to focus on Lisa right now.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And that's an important thing. I mean, I think this is, for lack of a better word, but the fuck it 50s, right?
Yes.
Where you just get to this point, you're just like, no, me,
yes.
now. You've had enough of me, and now I gotta
it's about Lisa.
I just have to carve it out.
And I think that's important, right? Because so many times, especially as mothers, right?
Well,
we give so much away. I mean, and that's a job that we want to do, right? But I just mean, I'm teaching, so I have all the students who I'm giving counseling to and guidance to, and helping them work through their insecurities, fears, and concerns. And then I have a daughter who I love, who's out of state. So I'm worried, like literally the phone call, like, oh goodness, please don't let this be a call that something happened. Like that's always in your mind, It's like, I need this space for me to really get the work out that I need to.
And then it makes sense because unless you carve time for you, you cannot really be in a aware and thoughtful and deep connection with others. You cannot come and meet others at a deep level if you're not, connecting with yourself first.
Yes.
I think that's why they tell you to put the air mask on first in the airplane. They say, parents, put your mask on first, tighten it, and then tend to your children.
Yes.
And, that's a very true point because, we need you.
Yes.
We need you in this world. And your initial instinct after the fire was just to get the heck out of here.
Yes.
And I'm really glad you stayed.
Me too.
Oh, this has been amazing, Lisa Diane. You are our first interviewee, and you're setting the bar a little high, I have to say.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, I won't say it's wonderful in the sense that like I'm setting the bar just high, but it's been a wonderful experience having this conversation, and it's always a pleasure to be here with you and to finally meet you, Patricia, in person, and Sky. I've only seen your name and email to see you, so this has been wonderful. And I hope everyone in the audience, the audio world, enjoys this conversation.
So we're going to introduce a segment at the end that we're going to bring back for each guest.
Okay.
We want to offer a more exploratory blue sky kind of question, right? So the question is, it's open-ended, be as expansive as you want. What project would you do if you had unlimited funding and time?
Oh, okay, if I had unlimited funding and time, it would be, I'm probably cheating here, a life project, because there are a couple of things I want to do, so I'm going to cover it. So I think the first project that comes to mind is my project about my father. My father died in December of 2022, and when I cleaned out his apartment, the last object I touched was a small suitcase in his closet, and it was filled with his writing. Most of it, I still haven't read all of it, but most of it is incomplete. But there's some really great character cards that he wrote out, various versions of unfinished novels that are wonderful. And so I started this project where in Los Angeles, I realized he lived within a 5-mile radius with kind of a Western, at that time in the 70s, kind of like, not just but like an epicenter, I would say, maybe for Black Angelenos. So I started photographing the residences where he lived and myself reading his work there. Or holding up the writing in front of that space from across the street and photographing that literal paper in front of that residence. So there are about 10 that I need to do. And actually I've been talking to a photographer and I need funding. So if I had all the money in the world, that's a project I do. And then another would be to get one of those, tricked out vans that you could drive across the country. And I want to drive around to each state and make paper mache sculptures of people that I meet. Like just meet people randomly and then make a paper mache bust of them.
Hilarious. That would be amazing.
Right?
I love it.
Yeah, I think those two top of my list. Oh, and another thing I'd love to do is like take a year off and go to Senegal and Mexico, maybe 6 months in Senegal, 6 months in Mexico, and really get down deep in the trenches with the silversmiths in those places. Senegal, Mali.
Wow, I love them.
Interesting.
That's amazing.
I love it.
Yeah, I think it would be fun.
Well, thank you again, Lisa Diane.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And we're going to wrap up with our thank yous. Thank you to Sky Park Tausig for being our amazing producer, Taras Matla at the University of Maryland Art Gallery, and Jonathan Formansky for letting us use your music.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks to Lisa Diane again for joining us today. Bye.
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 We are The Art Equation. You can find us wherever you listen every other Thursday.
Thanks for being here with us. We'd really love to hear your thoughts. So please subscribe. And if you have a moment to leave a review, it really helps us out. We love the feedback. Talk to you soon here on The Art Equation. The Art Equation is a podcast from Now Be Here with support from the University of Maryland Art Gallery. Now Be Here is a directory and resource created by and for women and non-binary artists. You can find more information at www.nowbehereart.com.
Oh, we should probably all do those actor warm-ups where they're like, ba, 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 la, 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 la.
This is going at the end. I mean, I feel warmed up. I feel very, yeah, let's do it.